Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Nebulae wash processed Ecuador from Coffea Circulor. And there's the bag right there. And Coffea Circulor, based out of Arendal, Norway. And this coffee was featured in our most recent blind taste test rankings video, where it finished second place out of 4 Pepe Yihon coffees on that day. If you watched that video, then you saw that we were extremely impressed by this coffee due to its clarity as well as florality, and it left one of the most positive first impressions I had had of any coffee this entire year, and it went to demonstrate what the Típica Mejorada variety is capable of, and it was going to be interesting to see if it maintained its status as one of my favorite coffees this year. This right here is day 31. The recipe we went with for this coffee was a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 94 degrees Celsius, and I like this one best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind. Coffea Circulor is a Nordic Light for the roast profile. Those things out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 14, first impression, it was that blind taste test day, and this coffee was marked by its soft washed characteristics, including the soft stone fruit, citrus, and there was a pretty tea-like aspect to this coffee as it was quite delicate, and just in one word, pretty. This was a very pretty cup of coffee in general, as it had so many of those delicate, delightful aspects to it, most distinctly those really soft fruits. Left such a positive first impression. Day 16 ran it through the Chemex, and it was very distinct on the citrus. So I have a bergamot flavor note listed on here, and that's the best and most consistent flavor profile I experienced throughout the time drinking this coffee, as it felt very apt. It was by far the most dominant aspect to this coffee, and it was quite long lasting as well. It was complemented by some slight stone fruits and some additional citric aspects to it, including a fair bit of lemon. So much citrus within this cup of coffee, and at that point I realized, okay, maybe the one thing I'm looking to do is tone down the citrus, and my entire objective from this coffee from the start was, I think there are 2 peach flavor notes listed on here. I wanted to get as much of the stone fruit as possible. Day 19. Lowered the temperatures, and it did tone down a fair bit of the citrus, which was nice because it allowed me to pick out a lot more from this coffee, as there is a great bit of complexity and depth within the cup itself, as once again there is a fair bit of that noted lemon. That was a little bit more pronounced, bergamot a little less dominant in this sense, a little bit of tropical sweetness as well as some slight stone fruits, and continuing to experience plenty of depth to the cup. Day 23, best day of the coffee to this point, as it had that geisha it-like factor, and that's the it-like factor I refer to in so many Panamanian geishas, which is that slightly citric, grainy, sweet component, which I often describe as fruity pebbles. It was here, it was present in this coffee on this day specifically, and that made it a standout day for this coffee in general, with a nice floral white base to it. And I don't think I emphasized the florality in this coffee, but there was so much florality within it throughout the time drinking it, the second most pronounced characteristic if you lump all the citric components together. Full clarity, which makes this cup of coffee slightly citric, herbal, floral, fruity, with a fair bit of that stone fruit as well. Just absolutely delightful. More stone fruit was a nice selling point to me on this day. Day 28, final notes we have. Again, this is a smaller bag of coffee, so the floral citric components take shape yet again with a clean base. Listed bergamot still continues to remain the most dominant aspect, but in a slightly less pronounced sense, still the most consistent and dominant part of this coffee. Citrus continues to be pronounced, as there's also a fair bit of that lemon still, and then a nice bit of the stone fruit, slight peachiness to it, but in a more subdued sense when compared to the really strong citric aspects. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and 3 level 5s, so let's run through those real quick. The finish at a level 5. I touched on that briefly on our second day of notes, that the bergamot was a very long-lasting citric finish to this coffee, and I think it does justify that level 5 mark. Toning it down a little bit more time has really helped with just how much there was of that bergamot, but even then, I think it has enough of a finish to justify that level 5 mark. Florality, level 5, yes. After the citrus, second most dominant characteristic into it. Very delightful, delicate floral components to this cup of coffee. It's very geisha-like in that sense, so absolutely adored the florality within this coffee. Citric fruit, level 5. Yes, I've been talking about that a lot, probably said citrus more times than I can count in this video, but I can't emphasize enough that bergamot as well as the lemon really pronounced in this coffee. So distinct, and it definitely justifies that level 5 mark. Cleanliness at a level 4, that's the most important one I wanted to touch on, because if the cleanliness was the same for this coffee as it was in every other coffee that we review, those justify a level 5 mark. The only reason I put it at the level 4 was because when we reviewed that geisha, that one was cleaner than this one, and this one remains on a very high side of that level 4 and definitely could justify a level 5 mark. I just wanted to demonstrate the difference in clarity between this one when compared to the geisha, which was cleaner enough to justify bumping this one down when compared to that one, since this is all part of one series. Sweetness, level 4. As mentioned, this one probably could also be at a level 5 mark. It's a pretty sweet cup of coffee, but when compared to some other ones that we're reviewing, it does not quite justify the level 5 mark, as some other ones are a little bit more sweet. Acidity, level 4, yes, very acidic cup of coffee, and the citrus is really going to impact a couple of other things in this tasting wheel, including the acidity, as there's a strong bit of citric acidity to it, as well as a strong bit of citric bitterness to it, and that's why the bitterness is all the way up at that level 3 mark. It is a pretty distinct citric bitterness to this coffee. Savoriness, level 2, mentioned there's a fair bit of herbality to it as well, and that's why you see a little bit of spice, a little bit of salt to this coffee as well. And I think if I'm being really nitpicky, the one thing about this tasting wheel that may have made this coffee not as good as some of the other ones in this series was that the stone fruit was only at a level 3, and it's the thing I was hoping to get the most out of, once again, given that there are 2 stone fruit flavor notes listed here on this bag of coffee. So I really wanted to get that in the most abundance, most prominence. However, it definitely wasn't for me, and I couldn't find a way to get more out of it. But even then, it was pronounced enough to justify a level 3 mark in this tasting wheel. I got plenty of it, and it was quite nice, especially when I was able to experience it. Last thing we'll discuss, body. I think that's attributed to the fact that I like this best through the Chemex, because through the V60 can probably push that up to a level 2 mark. However, the Chemex obviously is a lighter bodied coffee brewer in general, so that level 1 mark, I think that's mostly attributed to the Chemex. For the most part, though, I think I like the way that this tasting wheel looks. I think it's a pretty accurate representation of what I got from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. This one was another really impressive Pepe Hijón coffee, as I think in most other years, this one would probably be one of my top 3 favorite coffees of the year. It's in, weirdly, the most strong and heavy category this year, which is those Ecuadorian coffees, which I've been beyond blown away by this year. The reason that this one was the second one we're reviewing as opposed to the third one, since it did finish second, was because the other 2 were actually much more my types of coffee when compared to this one. I have to be really nitpicky when comparing these coffees, because these 4 were all super impressive coffees, and I think just being on the more citric side of things was the only sticking point for me. However, I still found this to be one of the most beautiful coffees we have ever reviewed on this channel. It really went to demonstrate that the Típica Mejorada variety is capable of being just as good as the Geisha variety, because this one was truly beautiful and spectacular. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to is somebody like myself. Is very my profile sort of coffee, maybe skewing a little bit more towards the citric side of things, but it's still super clean, sweet, fruity, and floral, most distinctly floral, with a very light profiled body and light profiled cup as well. So mix all of those factors together and it makes for a really wonderfully pretty cup in general. And if you're like me and like those coffees in general, then this one's going to be an excellent fit for you. I think I'll leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, we'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Nebulae wash processed Ecuador from Coffea Circulor. Thank you for watching.